Heaven is a concept many of us are familiar with. When your deeds have finally been recognized, and you can ascend to peace. Many religions have different depictions on what this heaven looks like. However, the main correlation they all share is that heaven is a safe haven. A paradise, if you will. Something else heaven often has are angels, those who are messengers of God. Today we will be talking about humans who have ascended to such heights and have become said angels. We'll uncover what their past seemed to be, and what threats still pose their lives. We can start off in the game, Pillars of Creation, where you are surrounded by 4 beacons. The green beacon is planted to the ground, sort of symbolizing whatever concept it holds is dead. It then says the following.
Truth stays dormant. Dear Alethea, death waits for no one.
What we can take away from this is whomever Alethea was can be presumed dead. It could also represent how the concept of truth is dead. However, let's not jump to conclusions just yet. The second beacon is more dark, saying the following.
There's nothing but deafening silence. You can hear your own heartbeat. The core of Sage to humanity, Tacitus, as their emissary. The silence is as void before you.
What we do know is Tacitus is the last name of Polaris, bringing us to the conclusion that each of the angels are responsible for each beacon. However, the question is raised, what happened to the green beacon? The third beacon illuminates with a more gilded color. It says the following.
You hear hymns, the song of angelic order and harmony grace your ears. The core of Pistis to humanity, Fidelia, as her emissary. Her faith is blinding, golden light.
A crux seems to be responsible behind the beacon of faith. Finally, the last beacon is a twilight lavender glow, saying the following.
You hear the chatter of philosophers. The song of life and death invades your ears. The core of Nous to humanity, Irideius, as their emissary. Their depth is miraculous, iridescent light.
Now that we have spoken of all these pillars, I want you to remember what they represent. They will become relevant later on. Anywho, walking behind this lavender beacon, you'll find this translucent wall. If you walk into it, it will take you to eudaimonia, otherwise known as happiness. This world, I can only assume, represents Achernar's headspace. Being vibrant with colors that change when you walk around. You can find many of these orbs that are scattered all along the realm. They all represent memories of Achernar, or, in other words, her thoughts. Something else I want to note are how these Roblox crossroad structures seem to be wedged into this realm. In a way, representing what Achernar remembers of her real life. The way I would describe this realm is balance. It has a lot of things that feel random and out of place. In other words, chaotic. Yet the game can still give off this feeling of peace. We can also learn about what Achernar is like. They seem pretty philosophical and seem to have believed they didn't deserve such of a high reward like this. She also claims almost remembering what her mother looks like before forgetting, which can tell us when she ascended to such a level, she has seemed to forgotten a major amount of her memories. All that's left is remnants of her past. However, Achernar isn't the only one limited to her own realm. Polaris and a crux have one too, each representing how they feel and relates heavily on what the descriptions of the beacons are. This helps us identify what personalities each may have, such as the Beacon of Faith, which represents a crux. A crux seems pretty religious in her realm, while Polaris has a more empty void, representing him and how he seems more quiet and more introverted, if you will. The question is raised, however, why were these 3 in specific picked for being the angels of each respected beacon? I can only assume it's because of their human lives. They seem to be the best ones to handle such responsibility. However, the mystery of the truth beacon is still a myth. Alright, editing note here, so Polaris joined me and this guy, and we talked to him, and eventually we asked about, like, Athelia, and the response confirmed my suspicion. Alethea's dead, though the new question is, by who? Something I would like to add is bad memories. You can find them in each respective angel's realm, which spreads light on what their insecurities are. The bad memories of Polaris and a crux don't lead anywhere, however Achernar's does. It takes you to this well, and once you touch it, it takes you to the thoughts of the Hell folk. It's a demonic, scary looking realm where there are these hell folk that follow you every time you look away. In the sky, you can see 2 beacons that illuminate the red, filthy area. One didn't take me anywhere, and I don't know if that was intentional or not. However, the other one did take me to July 21st, which has 3 portals. One that takes you to Polaris' apartment, and one that takes you to Acharnar's cabin, and one that takes you to this black void with a cross on the ground. I feel it's obvious it's supposed to show us what these angels did in their human lives. However, I feel it's also the day they all died. Under Polaris' desk, you can see a rope, and also a note that seems like a final message before he goes. At Acharnar's place, you can find this unexplained bloodstain on the ground. There's not much I could say about Acrux's area. I could say the knife could be symbolizing death or betrayal. However, this is a pretty big stretch, and I think you guys should take this with a grain of salt. It could also be what Acrux was thinking in her final moments. Maybe she was in some sort of coma. Who knows? In short, this game is really cryptic. However, that's the way I interpret it. So, to quickly summarize, there's these humans that became angels to act as these beacons. However, the mystery of the 4th beacon is still there. What happened to them? That's where I want to bring up a new person, Spirgrim. Spirgrim is this institution that seems to be working on biological advancements. However, its involvement in the myth seems very interesting. There was an encounter I had with it way back. However, I'm not sure if its canonicity still holds up, but it did describe these angels as experiments. I don't have any screenshots or footage of this, and I am going off a full memory of this interaction, so take this with a grain of salt. I have many theories on what Spirgrim's supposed to be. However, I don't want to make any assumptions just yet in case I'm wrong. However, I feel it has to do with how these humans were resurrected in a way after their death, and Spirgrim was behind it. In the end of the day, I'm not entirely sure on what happened. This is just my best guesses. In the end, this myth is still under some development and new things are still happening, so things may change in the future, who knows. I'm definitely willing to make another video off of this myth if anything does happen, so yeah. Otherwise, that's it for today's video. Before it ends, I wanted to add on something. We have a Discord server now. Hooray hurrah! I'm not sure how many people would actually join the server, but it's there, so if you want to join it, you can. Something else I want to add is I am planning to implement voice acting into my videos. So if you are interested, you could audition to be a voice actor or actress. I don't really know when you're gonna get voice lines, however, since not many myths interact with me. However, what I will say is, once you do, you're probably gonna have a week or so to do the voice lines. So yeah, there's that. If you want to do that, join the Discord server. I'll post more details later on it. Either way, I'll see you all later. Goodbye.